The season's done. The season's not really done. There's 2 games left in the season to go, but for all intents and purposes, it's done because all we had left to play for after the Clásico on Sunday was the Alves game to get to 100 points to become Centurions. That didn't work. There's a lot of reasons that didn't work, but we'll get into that later. So, what I want to talk about today was, since the season's all but over at this point, let's do a season recap. Let's look at how the season went, where we started off, the problems of the team, the difficulties that we faced, the challenges that we overcame, and just look at it from a holistic perspective and talk about what we should be doing going forward into the season, after the transfer window. Let me take you back to 2 years ago when Madrid had just won the Champions League and the league. They won the league with 95 points and they had just signed probably the world's best player in the world at that point in time, Kylian Mbappe, on a free. Not really on a free, there's a massive signing bonus involved. So, but anyway, lots of money spent. And they were adding Mbappe to an already stacked roster. And I think everyone who's a part of the football space on YouTube has heard about the if Madrid lands Mbappe video from AN9 Skills. So, we know how that went. So, the idea behind me telling you all of these things is do not downplay the 2 leagues that we won in this season. If I look back towards Messi's time at Barca, especially over the last decade, we won 9 league titles, right? We won 9 league titles. And I remember him being very specific about the fact that you don't underplay these leagues, right? Now, we all know that the Champions League is probably the most prestigious tournament in world football, and rightly so. It's the highest stakes, watched by the most number of people, but the league is where it's at. The league is where you have consistency and you have to, play each team on its own merit. So, the Champions League being a knockout tournament, there's so much luck involved, there's so much risk involved that you really can't judge your entire season basis that. Now, Barcelona being the club that we are, there are obviously standards to be maintained. So, I would say, at bare minimum, make the quarters, ideally make the semis, but again, like I said, knockout tournament, things don't go your way. So, we're okay with it. What I expect the team to do in this year is basically compete at the highest level, no embarrassing losses, none of the likes of your Romas and your Anfields and so on. So, the way we went out of those competitions, right, the 2 cup competitions that we went out of against Atleti in both cases, I was proud of the team. I know that things didn't go our way, especially from a refereeing perspective. But the way we fought back, especially in the Copa del Rey against Atleti, to almost reverse that 4-0 deficit, that's phenomenal. So, although there's a bit of an aftertaste, a slight bit of disappointment in how we exited those 2 competitions, looking at all of the factors that went into this league campaign, the cup campaign and the Champions League, that's my dog, by the way. Not my dog, but one of my dogs. Looking at all the factors that went into this, I am overall pretty satisfied with how our season went, right? So let's talk about the league. Now, I think before we started the season itself, I would say we could be considered to be favourites for the league because Madrid spent big in the summer, right? They spent close to 180 to 200 million. They bought Huijsen, they bought Carreras, they bought a bunch of other people. Now, obviously, none of them have panned out the way that, the Madridistas would have wanted them to, but it's still a significant outlay. Despite that, going into the season, I was fairly certain that our squad was a good deal better than this. I think our squad, even though there are a lot of holes, and I think the number of game breakers we have in our squad, in the front line especially, bar Lamine, is a little lacking. And I think we saw that a lot when Lamine wasn't really playing. When we had Lamine out, when we had Rafinha out, the choices on the wing were not very inspiring to say the least. I mean, it even got to a point where we stopped playing 2 wingers and we were playing Firmino on the wing, who did a phenomenal job. Okay, so let's talk about the league campaign, right? So if you go back to the first Clásico, when Madrid beat us all the way back in October, we were 5 points behind at that point in time, and we all remember how Madrid was celebrating it. They were talking like they'd wrapped up the league by then. Obviously, come last Sunday, that is no longer the case. We beat them 2-0 to go 14 points clear. 14 points is huge, guys. Do not underestimate how large of a gap that is, especially when you're competing against a club with the reputation, the size, and the expectations of a Real Madrid, right? So, like I said, very easy to downplay the league, but do not forget that these things are very hard to win, and it's only when you don't win these leagues that you understand the importance of winning it. The league is where you build your foundation of winning. You got to build the culture of winning by consistently competing for the league. I'm not one of those people that that thinks that it's Champions League or bust. No, the league is what you're judged on week in and week out. So, massive respect to the team for winning the league back to back. Winning the league back to back hasn't been done since we ourselves did it, I think close to about 8 years ago under Valverde. I think we won the league in 17, 18, and 18, 19, right? This league's not, these campaigns, they're not given as much credit, I think, because of two reasons. One, because Madrid three-peated during this era, and Barca and Madrid, their seasons are always looked at, in comparison with each other. If one club's doing well and the other club's also kind of doing well, you don't really, the victory doesn't feel as sweet. You kind of want Madrid to also do badly when we're doing well. And if you look at this season, I think Barca fans would be absolutely ecstatic about everything that's going on in Madrid, because that is an absolute dumpster fire. In fact, if you see what Florentino Perez has come out of the last week or so in both of his press conferences, one press conference and one sit down with El Chiringuito, that club is absolutely on fire. I think they're all losing their heads over there at the moment. So yeah, as a Barca fan, it's pretty nice to just relax, sit back, and watch all of that unfold. Okay, so we've spoken about the league, right? I think what I want to do now is basically go over the squad and discuss each of the players in the squad, and we'll talk about whether they've been a success this season, what they could have improved upon, and so on and so forth. And we'll use that to sort of tie it into what we should be doing for the summer. Right, let's start with the goalkeeper, Joan Garcia. Joan Garcia was he was the reason Espanyol did not get relegated. And if you saw the scenes at the end of last season where the Espanyol fans have him on their shoulders and they're basically treating him like a demigod, all warranted. Man was the goalkeeper of the season last season without a shadow of a doubt. And for us to be able to get him for 25 million, which is basically bargain basement prices in this inflated market, we basically got a keeper who ticks all of our boxes. He's commanding the air, great with the ball at his feet, comes up with clutch moments. So obviously things he can improve upon, but he's 25, which is exceptionally young for a goalkeeper. And if I think about it, if I look at the squad from last season to this season's it's pretty much the same. The only addition we made was Joan Garcia. And looking at all the injuries that we've had this season, right? Rafinha's been out for so many games. Pedri has been missing. Leva has been massively off form and also missed a bunch of games. Lamine also, I think the early season he had pubalgia and he wasn't able to get into the right rhythm to, play at the level of explosiveness that he can. If you look at all of these factors, the squad's basically kind of been threadbare. The biggest difference has been the addition of Joan Garcia, because the amount of security that he's brought in between the nets, dude, I have not experienced that, I think, since maybe Prime Valdez back in the Pep era. I appreciate Ter Stegen for everything that he's done, but there is a significant, difference in quality between him and Joan. So, wonderful signing decor. Thank God we have Joan Garcia. I think he's going to mind our nets for at least the next decade. Okay, that's the keeper. Szczesny, we all know what he's there for. He's there to smoke cigars and be in the background. So we're not going to come to him as much in this. Okay, the centre backs. Kubarsi. Kubarsi is 19 and the dude plays with a level of maturity that I have not seen in seasoned vets at the highest level, right? I think if we look at the fact that Barca plays a high line, and if you look at how everybody's, spoken about our high line, spoken about how risky it is, how difficult it is to play in a system that is so high risk, where the whole team is supposed to commit forward and play on the front foot at all times, for someone who's 18, 19 to step in and lead a back line in the manner that he has done is exceptional. And it's even more impressive considering, that Inigo Martinez left in the summer and he wasn't even replaced. and his partner essentially became Gerard Martin. So, Kubarsi, phenomenal dude, is 18, 19, and only better things to come. I think the leap that he's going to take in the next 2, 3 years is going to be significant, and I think, this is nothing new, but since he's 18, we obviously have the best to come from him. So, we spoke about Kubarsi. Let's talk about his centre back partner for most of the season, that is Mr. Gerard Martin. So, when Gerard Martin broke into the team, right, at the start of last season, he was the second choice left back at the club, not even in contention for being in the centre back spot, right? And I think when most of us saw us, people are wondering why Flick is giving Gerard Martin so many chances, because it wasn't reflected in his footballing skill on display, right? Everyone's thinking, why is Flick playing him? Does he have any compromising photos of Flick? What does he have on him? But I think as the season went on, I think if I look back to last season's semi-final against Inter, I think that was the moment when you really felt like Gerard Martin stepped up. You remember his cross to Olmo for the goal, and I know he was sort of culpable in Inter's, winner for equalizer slash winner, but he's developed leaps and bounds across the season. He plays with so much composure now, and when you have good centre back pairings, you get a level of security from them that can't really be described in words. You got to feel it. And if I watch the pairing of Kubarsi and Martin, they have such excellent chemistry. They sweep our balls really well. Now, obviously, they're not perfect, and we know that you can make a big qualitative leap in your defensive capabilities by signing Bastoni. And obviously, we are trying to sign Bastoni, or at least we have been in touch with him, his entourage, and I think where we're at right now is it's Flick's decision as to whether or not we want to actually pursue him. But yeah, man, Gerard Martin at the very least has given us cause for concern in terms of us thinking about whether it actually makes sense to spend 60 or 70 million on someone like Bastoni, where the opportunity cost is you could bolster our forward line with that money. And I'll come to the forward line in a bit. But yeah, Gerard Martin, man, phenomenal. I think if I had to give an award for the most improved player over the last couple of seasons, has to be Gerard Martin, right? Cool. The other central defenders, Ronald Araujo, man, I feel for him. I know he's going through a lot of personal stuff, and things aren't really going his way on the pitch. But when I watch him play, he slows down our attack to a immeasurable degree. I think ball progression just dies when Araujo is on the pitch. And I think in a club like Barca, right, however good you are defensively, and being brutally honest, I don't think Araujo is very good defensively either. I think he uses his physical capabilities to compensate for a lack of game reading in a lot of scenarios. Yeah, so if you've seen how Araujo has been used by Flick as well, dude's basically only been used as a backup right back. He's not even being considered as a centre back anymore. So looking at that, looking at Araujo, and Christensen is also who spends most time in the hospital than on the pitch, right? I think both of these guys have to go. I think the amount of wages that they're taking up is also pretty substantial. So, you know what? If you have to go into next season with with our centre backs being Kubarsi, Gerard Martin, Eric Garcia, and let's say Bastoni, I would be quite satisfied with that. I think we need to make up. We need to clear a lot of wage space for us. Araujo is on big wages. Christensen is on big wages, and I don't think either of them contribute to the team enough to warrant the big money that they're on. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Araujo and Christensen. Both of them got to go. Balde as well, right? It's confusing to talk about Balde because you see the talent that he has. You see that he could be used as a defensive left back pretty well. And I also think he's kind of been hampered by Rafinha's role in the team. And this is not Rafinha's fault, but because Rafinha he's not a player who can hold width, right? You don't really want Rafinha starting from the wing and trying to beat your man there. You want him drifting into central spaces and attacking depth. So because that, Balde's kind of been asked to hold width on the wing and, take up a lot more of the attacking impetus on that side. Unfortunately for us, I don't think that really plays to his strengths. I would love to see him with a touchline winger who can beat his man one-on-one more often than not. I think that would play to his strengths a lot more. But you also got to blame Balde because it feels like he's the same player that he was 3 to 4 years ago. It doesn't feel like there's been any significant qualitative leap. I don't know whether this is down to uh, a shift in mentality. I don't think it's really a lack of talent either. I feel like if he applied himself, he could get significantly better at a few things. But yeah, time's running out. Joao Cancelo is very obviously at this point first choice left back. Cancelo coming in from Al Hilal on that 6 month deal was a game changer for us because I am not sure how well we would have performed in the last stretches without Cancelo. Because we went into the last few months without Lamine. And one of the things which is really, really, really jarring when Lamine was on the pitch was the distinct lack of 1v1 threat. Like, we had nobody who could take their man, beat them reliably, and put a cross in. Like I said, we were forced to play Fermin on the wing. And Fermin's phenomenal. Fermin offers so much. But if you don't have someone who can beat your man on the wing 1v1, what it does is it lets opponents double or even triple team Lamine, which really negates his impact. And Lamine, when he has to face a scenario like this where he has so many people on him, all the team's attention is on him, he's playing with again a defensive right back in Jules Koundé, and that brings me to Jules Koundé because I think it's time we moved on from Koundé, to be honest, because if you look at the team's evolution and if you look at Lamine's evolution, right, if you look at where his future in this team is going to be, it's definitely not going to be as a touchline winger. It's either going to be more central or at the very least, he's going to be given a lot of freedom to drift into central spaces. And for that to happen, you kind of need to have a right back who can hold width, who's comfortable on the ball under pressure. And, the opposition basically has to respect him having the ball. Now, Koundé is great when it comes to off the ball movement for Lamine. He constantly tries to give him options, but the opposition also doesn't have to care as much about him because the on ball quality is lacking. And, we're seeing the effects of this. You've heard about the debate between Lamine and Michael Olise and who's better and who's not. I think something which is really, eye-opening in this, if you look at the kind of passes that Lamine receives and the kind of passes that Olise receives, most of the passes that Lamine receives are closer towards the touchline, where he's got to beat 1-2 players to make anything happen. It's all through his passing, or he's got to dribble 2-3 players to create a chance. Olise, on the other hand, has far more freedom to drift into central spaces because Conrad Leimer constantly bombs down that wing and offers options. And he has some degree of threat on the ball as well. So what I'm trying to say is, Koundé, man, I love you, but I think it's time to go. I think we got to make some changes. Now, I don't know if we have the money to bring someone in because, we got to prioritize where our money is going to go in the summer. But I would be fairly comfortable with Eric Garcia and even like a Xavi Espart, filling up that role. I feel much more confident with them on the ball, to be honest. So, yeah, Koundé, man, I mean, it's kind of unfair to him as well also because he's a centre back. We bought him as a centre back. And when we bought him from Sevilla, he was one of the best centre backs in the league. And we wanted to buy him specifically to play a pretty high line, pairing Araujo with Koundé, right? So I remember Xavi specifically mentioning this in that Amazon docu-series where he was like, if we get to pair Araujo and Koundé, we could play a high line the way Liverpool play a high line. Xavi, man, I'm sorry, but Araujo and Koundé are not suited to playing a high line. I think we've seen that. Yeah, so we've spoken about defenders. Who are we really only happy with, right? I would say we're happy with 3 defenders right now. We're happy with Kobarsi, we're happy with Gerard Martin, and we're happy with Cancelo. Despite that, right, the team is on course to concede the lowest number of goals in the league. Joan Garcia is going to win the Zamora Trophy. So all this is massive credit to one man and one man only, and that is Hansi Flick. Hansi Flick, dude, changed our lives. Anyway, let me come to the midfield then. So our midfield essentially consists right now of Pedri, Frankie, Fermin, and Dani Olmo, with Eric Garcia essentially being your backup CDM in these positions. Now, for most of the season, we've played without our starting midfield pairing of Frankie and Pedri. And to me, in comparison with PSG's midfield, I think these are the 2 best midfields in the world. PSG have Vitinha, João Neves, and Fabian Ruiz or Warren Emery. We have Pedri, Frankie, and Gavi. And I think these three, if I put them up against any midfield in the world, I would back ours to come out, right? Unfortunately, we haven't seen our starting midfield many times this season. In fact, I think we only seen them. We only saw that midfield of Pedri, Frankie, and Gavi once. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I only saw it in the Clásico. I only saw it for the last 30 minutes of the Clásico. And if I look at how Flick has set up this team, right, from the start of last season we played with two midfielders and a cam slash number 10. Now, the number 10's role was essentially to be a shadow striker. Now, I think as the seasons progressed and as we've dealt with injuries and how teams have also adapted to us, I think that number 10 role, that person can't be a number 10 alone. I think depending on game state, looking at the opposition, looking at how the game's panning out, I think the best way to go would be a midfield three of Frankie, Pedri, and Gavi, because best three players in midfield by far, highest level of technical security on the ball, the fight, the bite in midfield, the composure. I don't think any midfield in the world touches our midfield when all three of them are fit and on fire. So yeah, I think this is one place where you don't really have to look at so many additions or changes. The only sort of change I can envision here is Marc Casado probably leaving. Now, Casado loves the club. Dude is basically born in Barcelona. He's a culé from Masia. But the more we see him play, I think there's a distinct sort of lack of quality in his actions. Now, that does not mean to say he's a bad player. It's that I don't think that he's the right player for a club like Barcelona. I know this sounds harsh, but life's life. If you can get say 20-25 million for Casado, I would sell him, as harsh as that sounds. And Islam Asia, if there's one thing this club knows, is to bring out the best midfielders. I think we already have Tommy Marquez in line. I think Flick's already got him penciled in to be the Casado replacement. So next season, you're going into the season with a midfield. The starting midfield, I think, would be Pedri, Gavi, and Frankie. We have Dani Olmo, we have Fermin Lopez, we have Tommy Marquez, all of them coming in. So I think we have enough. Yeah, we have enough options in midfield. We have Marc Bernal also. I forgot about Marc Bernal. Yeah, man. Quick note on Marc Bernal. When he came on, right, in the Clásico, I think the second half, he played this gorgeous long ball to Frankie in behind the defense. And this was a Frankie who was sort of reprising his 2021 role under Koeman with a lot of box crashing. If you think of how Frankie plays or where we've seen him for a lot of his career, it's at the base of midfield, which is pretty normal considering that, his ball progression is absolutely elite and he's incredibly press resistant. But you can't shoehorn Frankie into one role. I think Frankie's at his best when he's given a certain degree of freedom. And what having Pedri and Gavi in midfield allows Frankie to do is bomb forward as often as he wants, knowing that there's a Gavi behind him to mop up all those loose balls. Gavi is an absolute bulldog. So yeah, so that long ball which he played, right, Bernal, which he played to Frankie, and Frankie held off Rudiger, he laid it off to Lewandowski, and Lever should have passed to Fermin. That would have been 3-0. That would have been it was an obvious pass. I would blame Lever for this, but that's beside the point. But yeah, anyway, I think our midfield is in absolutely great hands. I don't see any reason for us to go and spend any money this summer because I'm going to come to the forward line next, and that is where we need to spend most of our money. Cool, let's talk about the forward line. Lamine is the best player in the world. He's 18. He's only going to get better. There is absolutely nothing to worry about. When it comes to Lamine, there's only one thing you're going to talk about, and that is maximizing Lamine. Get him a better right back. I mean, I'm pretty sure Fort would also do a pretty good job in this. Get him a better right back and get him a striker who's mobile and can dominate the box to some degree, right? Now, Lever was supposed to be our starting striker for the season, and he started off in that way, but Lever's 38, and you can't really expect him to press the way he did or, hold up the ball as well as he did or, combat defenders as well as the way he used to in his prime. So Lever really took a backseat, and we, as the season progressed, we saw the shark come into the picture, Ferran Torres. Ferran's really good at a few things. He's really good at running in behind. The options and off the ball movement that he gives you is second to none. He's extremely hardworking, he's willing to take a backseat in terms of his role in the squad. Now, it's incredibly rare to be able to find a player who can score 20 goals a season, but is also, who's happy to be second choice forward. Yeah, so most of the time we've seen Lamine this season take advantage of Ferran's runs in behind. If you think back to the Copa del Rey final last season, the 2-2 equalizer, it was Lamine's ball over the top to Ferran running in behind. So we've seen that pattern work numerous times. Now, as good as Ferran is, we also know that he's not ideally the starting striker for a club like ours. I would be more than happy to keep him as a backup, but looking at the people that have been linked to, we've been linked to Julian Alvarez, João Pedro, Ashlani, so how many other players, right, as striker. But I think one thing which is clear is Lever is going to be moving on at the end of the season, and it's been 4 years of great service. Leva came in at a time when the club was on its knees, right? We had very little money to spend. We had, what is those levers called? The palankas. We had to activate those economic levers to sign Koundé, Rafinha, and Leva. And this was a Leva at 34. And, it's logical to raise eyebrows when we're spending 50 million on a 34-year-old. But what Leva has done for us in the last 4 years, I don't think any fan would forget his contribution. The dude's been like a dad to every kid in that dressing room. He's not even dad, people call him grandpa. Him and Chesney are the grandpas of the squad. Leva scored over 100 goals for us in his 4 seasons here. I can't think of many players who scored 100 goals for 3+ clubs, the clubs being Barca, Bayern, and Dortmund. So, as much as Lever's declined, and the decline is kind of extremely visible, that doesn't take away from the player that he's been for this club, and I think he leaves this club a legend of the club without a shadow of a doubt. So, yeah, man, thank you, Lever. So, let's see who replaces Lever. My guess is going to be João Pedro, because, seeing the reports that PSG are in for Alvarez, and I'm pretty sure PSG will pay whatever it takes to get him. And I don't think Atletico want to sell their best player to us as well. Yeah, I don't think we'll see Leva again next season, but thank you, Leva, for everything. Coming on the last forward spot, we have Rafinha. So again, Raf was great last season, probably our MVP along with Lamine and Pedri. But this season, Rafinha's seen a very injury-plagued season. I barely remember our front three starting any games. Our front three of Lamine, Leva, and Rafinha. I think they've started less than, say, 25% of our games this season. So we've really not gotten to see the best of Rafinha. And if I look at Rafinha's profile, right, we all know what he offers. Like I've mentioned, relentless pressing, dude leads from the front in the press, which is absolutely crucial to the kind of way we play football. His mentality, just the desire to win, it's off the charts. But at the same time, looking at how teams set up against us, right? Looking at how teams try to double team or triple team Lamine, that kind of makes sure that the person on the other flank is always at some point going to be getting a 1v1 opportunity. Which is why I think that left winger has to be a demon in a 1v1 battle. So as much as I love Rafinha, it kind of feels like there's another season left in him at the highest level, and I feel like he's going to get some sort of big money offer from Saudi and we let him go on very amicable terms. But so since Rafinha didn't play, the person we saw in his place was a certain Englishman called Marcus Rashford. Now with Rashford, it's kind of been a mixed bag, because if I look at his output purely from a statistical point of view, right, dude has close to 30 GAs, which as a backup forward, you'd be very happy with. Now, if I talk about Rashford, the most recent memory I have of him is the free kick goal that he scored against Madrid in the Clásico. Great goal, right? God knows when the last time someone scored a free kick for us was. I remember Ferran scored one, and before that it was Leo Messi. It was Messi from like 2021. Nobody scores free kicks in this team. It's quite appalling that way that a team like Barcelona does not have good free kick takers. Tangent. Anyway, so we remember the goal Rashford scored, right? So that game sort of brought out the best and worst of Rashford to me, because you have end product, you have a phenomenal piece of play in the goal, but he was responsible for so many ball losses. Right? It felt like at times Rashford is a place where some attacks go to die. Now I know that's harsh, but the dude really lacks technical security in like congested areas. So um, in a system as high risk, high reward as ours, losing the ball in the middle, basically gives the opposition a free run in our defense if our rest defense is not set up as well. So because of that, I don't really trust Rashford as a 1v1 outlet, and because of the way teams play us, because of the way teams play Lamine, I think it's imperative that we have a 1v1 outlet on the wings, which is why I would not go ahead and take the option to purchase Rashford on a permanent transfer. I think he's been a phenomenally successful loan. You can't argue with close to 30 GAs and the impact that he's had. He's had goals in big games. He scored against Madrid. I remember his performance against Newcastle as well in the group stages of the league was phenomenal. But yeah, thank you, Rashford, man. It was nice having Englishmen play in this club, but I think the club's got to make some. They've got to basically choose someone slightly better than you, as harsh as that sounds. Cool, and that sort of brings me to the manager, Mr. Hansi Flick. When Flick arrived at this club, the team that he took over was in disarray, right? Xavi made it very clear to the board that this team was not good enough to compete with Madrid for the league, especially a Madrid which is getting Mbappe into their team. So Hansi Flick has not complained. He's taken the tools at his disposal and built a squad that's won the league back to back. He's built a squad which scores goals for fun. He's built a squad which scored goals. The team has scored the same close to the same number of goals as the team did in the MSN era, right? With a pretty close to washed Leva, Rafinha, a very young Lamine. I mean, we're taking that front three and comparing them to the greatest front three of all time, Messi, Neymar, and Suarez. So I can't give Flick any more credit, right? And the fact that he actually, managed the club for the Clásico on the day that his dad had passed away. No words, man. No words of Flick. I think he's changed all of our lives, and at least to me personally, I think he's the Barca coach slash manager that I have the most amount of affection for, apart from Pep. So, I think we've spoken about everybody there. If I had to rate the season out of 10, I'd probably give it an 8. An 8 only because we did not, say, progress to the CL, to semi-finals of the Champions League. If we had, I would give the season a 9 comfortably. I know we didn't get 100 points, but I don't think anybody going into the season expected 100 points. What we did expect was the team to compete in all 3 competitions and ideally win the league. And we won the league. We won the league by 14 points once we beat Madrid. So, yeah, great season, phenomenal season. I think it's been one of the most fun seasons as a fan to date, and I think the amount of excitement going into next season will be off the charts. It'll be very interesting to see what we do in the summer in terms of the kind of transfers we make. Are we reaching 1v1? That tension is always there with this club. This club forces you to learn about finance more than football at times. That's just the way it is. But yeah, great season on the whole. I had a great time watching the boys play, and let's see how they do in the coming season. I will talk to you soon. Bye bye.